Sunday, 8:12 p.m. Katie stood in the middle of our Seattle kitchen like she was waiting for a timer to go off. The overhead light caught the edge of her coffee mug and the smooth, practiced calm on her face. "You have 24 hours," she said. "Tomorrow at 8, Ryan is moving in." No anger, no tremble. She said it the way you'd confirm a furniture delivery window. I was still holding my keys to the house I bought years before we ever said vows, before we ever shared a last name. The metal felt heavier than it should have. I didn't ask who gave her the right. I didn't ask how long this had been planned. I just looked past her at the hallway, at the framed photos we never updated, at the corner where her shoes used to live until she started leaving them in the car. Something shifted in me, quiet, permanent, like a bolt snapping under pressure. I nodded once, not because I agreed, but because I understood. That was the point of no return. We had been together 8 years. Long enough that people stopped asking questions and started assuming permanence. We met at a mutual friend's birthday in Capitol Hill. She was sharp, quick with words, the kind of person who could hold a room without raising her voice. I was already 3 years into building my consulting practice, focused on numbers, structure, risk mitigation. She liked that I was steady. I liked that she wasn't. By the time we married, I had purchased the house in North Seattle, a practical place, nothing flashy. Good bones. Fixed-rate mortgage. I handled the renovations myself over 2 summers. New floors, reinforced deck, updated wiring. Katie picked paint colors and hardware. From the outside, it looked balanced. I worked in financial consulting, mostly mid-sized firms needing restructuring or compliance cleanup. Long hours, but predictable. Spreadsheets don't lie. Contracts don't improvise. If something is wrong, the math exposes it. Katie worked in marketing for a startup that never seemed to make the same product twice. Rebranding cycles, new investors, big ideas. She thrived in that environment. Constant motion, constant noise. At first, I admired it. It felt ambitious. Our life had structure. Sunday dinners at home. Occasional weekends down to Portland when we needed to feel younger than we were. We talked about expanding the kitchen, maybe renting out the basement unit. There were conversations about children, though they always stayed hypothetical, someday floating comfortably ahead of us. The distance didn't arrive like a storm. It came in small, defensible pieces. New clients she couldn't name clearly. Confidential, she'd say, shrugging. Late-night calls taken outside on the back deck, voice lowered. Increased travel that didn't match the company's size. More time angled toward her phone, screen tilted away out of habit rather than secrecy, almost like muscle memory. I noticed the timing shifts first. She used to come home at 6:15, then 7:30, then don't wait up. When I'd ask how her day went, her answers were polished but empty. High-level summaries without texture. Marketing campaigns without specifics. I told myself it was stress. Startups burn hot. Investors demand results. I've seen it in clients. Pressure changes people. I chose explanations that preserved the version of her I understood. There were smaller things too. She started correcting me in conversations, subtle but consistent. "That's not exactly what happened," she'd say, reshaping minor details. She began keeping her laptop in her bag instead of on the desk in the den. Password changed. Not dramatically, just quietly. We still ate dinner together some nights. Still watched shows. But she seemed partially elsewhere, like she was buffering. I blamed the market, the economy, ambition. I blamed everything except the possibility that the foundation had already shifted. Looking back, the signs weren't loud. They were procedural, and I should have recognized that. In my world, patterns are everything. I just wasn't ready to apply that skill at home. When she gave me 24 hours, every isolated detail reorganized itself. Patterns are rarely visible when you're standing inside them. But once she said his name, Ryan, and attached a deadline to my existence in my own house, the noise filtered out. What was left was structure. The laptop snapping shut when I walked into the room wasn't about privacy. It was timing. The angle of her body when she texted wasn't casual. It was defensive positioning. The separate checking account she opened 3 months earlier, for freelance flexibility, suddenly aligned with the transfers I'd noticed but hadn't challenged. 24 hours clarifies things. I stood there in the kitchen and replayed the last 6 months like a case file. The trip to San Diego that extended by 2 days because of client onboarding. The sudden interest in cryptocurrency ventures she couldn't explain in detail. The careful way she chose neutral language whenever I asked direct questions. She hadn't lied loudly. She'd redirected. And I had accepted redirection because it was easier than confrontation. When she said Ryan was moving in, I didn't ask where I was supposed to go. That detail didn't matter. What mattered was that she believed she had the authority to replace me. Not just emotionally, but logistically. In my house. I watched her face while she spoke. There was no hesitation. She had rehearsed this. Not the words exactly, but the posture. Chin level. Shoulders squared. Calm. That calm told me everything. I realized something in that moment. The relationship hadn't collapsed that night. It had been dismantled in increments. The announcement was just the final administrative step. Instead of arguing, I shifted internally. I stopped thinking like a husband and started thinking like an analyst. What assets were joint? What was separate property? When had the transfers begun? What documentation existed? What language was in the prenup regarding infidelity, financial diversion, cohabitation? I didn't feel rage. I felt alignment. The emotional fog lifted because there was no longer ambiguity. She had made her position explicit. Ryan wasn't hypothetical. He was scheduled. Katie moved past me to rinse her mug, as if she'd just informed me about a plumber arriving in the morning. I noticed she didn't make eye contact again. She assumed I would react the way I always had, confused, searching, trying to reconcile. Instead, I said, okay. One word. Measured. It wasn't surrender. It was acknowledgement. I went upstairs and closed the bedroom door. Not to isolate, but to think. I sat on the edge of the bed and opened my laptop. Not to scroll through memories, not to reread messages, to review numbers. Because if there's one thing I've learned in my profession, it's this. Truth leaves a paper trail. And once you see the pattern, you don't unsee it. That night, I stopped pretending I didn't recognize the structure of what was happening. The pieces fit too cleanly. I slept for 3 hours that night. Not because I was restless. Because once something becomes clear, there's no reason to pace around it. I lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to the faint hum of the refrigerator downstairs and the occasional vibration of her phone on the nightstand. She didn't silence it anymore. She didn't need to. Around 2:17 a.m., she slipped out of bed and walked into the hallway. I heard the soft click of the guest room door closing. Not hiding, just relocating. That was the internal break. There was no surge of anger, no urge to confront her in the dark. Instead, something in me settled, like a gear finally locking into place after months of slipping. I stopped asking why. I stopped replaying conversations looking for missed clues. The situation no longer required interpretation. It required action. By 5:30 a.m., I was downstairs at the kitchen table with my laptop open. Same table where we used to plan vacations and argue about backsplash tile. I brewed coffee the way I always did, measured, consistent. The routine steadied me. I opened our shared financial dashboard first. Every joint account, every linked credit card. I exported 6 months of statements into a separate encrypted folder. Not because I expected drama, because documentation matters. At 6:10, I reviewed the prenup. We drafted it before the wedding. Mutual agreement, no pressure. She had her own attorney. Clear language. Separate property remains separate. Financial misconduct or proven adultery triggers asset protection clauses. No alimony in cases of infidelity. It wasn't punitive. It was preventative. I read it twice. Then I printed a copy. If you've made it this far, this story clearly caught your attention. If you're enjoying it, drop a like on the video. It helps me see what kind of stories you want more of next. Let's keep going. At 7 o'clock, Katie came downstairs in workout clothes. She didn't ask why I was up early. She poured coffee without looking at me. You're quiet, she said. I'm thinking, I replied. She nodded like that confirmed her expectations. In her mind, I was probably cycling through grief stages. Shock, bargaining, maybe anger next. She didn't realize I had already moved past reaction. I wasn't preparing to beg her to reconsider. I wasn't planning a speech. I wasn't calculating emotional leverage. I was reorganizing my position. When someone gives you a deadline in your own home, they assume you'll spend that time scrambling, packing, calling friends, looking for temporary shelter. I wasn't scrambling. I was inventorying. At 8:42 a.m., she left for what she called a strategy meeting. She kissed the air near my cheek, missing intentionally by half an inch. When the front door shut, the house felt different. Not emptier, clearer. I walked room by room, Not for nostalgia, but for confirmation. The deed in the safe upstairs. The original closing documents dated 3 years before our wedding. The renovation receipts. The separate investment accounts in my name only. By 9:30, I had a folder organized. By 9:45, I had an appointment scheduled with my attorney for 10:30. 24 hours. She thought it was a countdown for me. It wasn't. It was a window. The attorney's office was 10 minutes from downtown. Glass exterior, neutral carpeting, no artwork on the walls that could be interpreted as emotional. I've worked with Daniel for years, mostly corporate matters, contract reviews, compliance disputes. He knows how I think. When I walked in at 10:28 a.m., he looked up once and immediately understood this wasn't business as usual. Personal, he asked. Yes. He closed the file in front of him and turned fully toward me. I didn't dramatize it. I laid out the facts the way I would in a client briefing. Wife issued a 24-hour deadline. Third party moving into primary residence. Joint funds transferred to external individual under ambiguous business justification. Prenup in place with infidelity clause. Daniel didn't interrupt. He just took notes. Documentation? He asked. I slid the folder across the desk. Bank statements highlighted. The $20,000 transfer broken into 4 installments over 8 weeks. Memo lines referencing venture support. Screenshots of the new checking account she opened without discussion. The San Diego travel dates cross-referenced with the transfers. Who's Ryan? He asked. Alleged tech founder, I said. San Diego-based. Claims to be developing a logistics platform. Daniel raised an eyebrow. Claims. I nodded. I ran a preliminary search this morning. No registered entity under the name she provided. No filings in California under his full legal name. Daniel leaned back slightly. You want to move fast? Yes. Emotionally or strategically? Strategically. That answer seemed to settle something between us. We discussed the prenup language line by line. The adultery clause was explicit. Financial dissipation tied to extramarital relationships triggered asset protection and reimbursement provisions. Clear enough to withstand challenge. Do you have proof of the relationship? He asked. She announced he's moving into the house tonight. I said. I have text notifications visible on our shared tablet. I can retrieve them. Daniel nodded slowly. That will help. By 11:15 a.m., we had a plan. Immediate action on freezing the joint account to prevent further transfers. Draft divorce petition citing financial misconduct and breach of marital agreement. Secure proof of property ownership predating marriage. Initiate service as soon as possible. I didn't feel vindictive. I felt aligned. On the drive home, traffic on I-5 crawled as usual. People switching lanes impatiently. Horns in the distance. Normal Monday noise. It struck me how ordinary everything looked. At 12:03 p.m., Daniel called to confirm the joint account freeze request had been processed. Funds inaccessible pending review. At 12:47, I received a draft of the divorce petition via encrypted email. I parked in the driveway and sat for a moment before going inside. 24 hours. She thought I would spend them pleading. Instead, I spent them documenting. When I walked through the front door, the house was quiet. I went straight to the den and opened the shared tablet. The messages were still there. Ryan, can't wait for our new start. Katie, tomorrow at 8. He'll be gone. No hesitation in her words. No ambiguity. I took screenshots, forwarded them to Daniel. Then I closed the tablet and set it back exactly where it had been. By 3 p.m., the divorce papers were finalized. By 4:15, a process server was scheduled for 8:05 p.m. Timing matters, especially when someone believes they control it. By 6:30 p.m., the house was staged. Not emotionally. Logistically, I had placed a single folder on the kitchen counter, copy of the deed, highlighted prenup clause, printout of the joint account freeze confirmation. Nothing dramatic, just documentation. I changed the Wi-Fi password at 6:42. Updated the garage keypad at 6:47. Small adjustments, clean and reversible if necessary. At 7:15, Katie came home. She looked lighter. Not happier exactly, more resolved. She carried that same calm expression from the night before, like she'd already processed whatever guilt might have surfaced. Is everything packed? She asked, setting her bag down. I was at the dining table reviewing my laptop. Everything important is handled, I said. She interpreted that as compliance. I could see it in the slight release of her shoulders. She walked upstairs without another word. At 7:58 p.m., headlights swept across the living room wall. A silver SUV pulled into the driveway. I watched from the window without stepping outside. Ryan stepped out first. Mid-30s, casual confidence, carrying himself like someone arriving at a furnished solution. He circled the vehicle and opened the passenger door for Katie, who had already come downstairs with 2 suitcases. 2. That told me something. She hadn't packed her whole life. Just a version of it. The doorbell rang at exactly 8:04 p.m. Katie opened the door before I could reach it. Ryan stood there with a controlled smile, one hand resting on a suitcase handle. "Hey," he said softly to her. Then he noticed me behind her. There was a brief assessment in his eyes. Measurement. He expected resistance. Instead, I stepped forward calmly. "Good evening," I said. Before either of them could respond, another knock came, firmer this time. All 3 of us turned. I walked past them and opened the door. The process server stood on the porch holding a manila envelope. "Are you Katie Reynolds?" he asked. She stiffened. "Yes." "You've been served." He handed her the documents and asked her to confirm receipt. Ryan's posture shifted slightly, confusion replacing confidence. "What is this?" she asked, flipping through the pages. "Divorce petition," I said evenly. "Filed today." Her face drained of color, not dramatically, just gradually. She scanned the highlighted sections. The adultery clause, the financial dissipation reference, the immediate freeze on joint assets. "You can't just," she started. "I can," I replied. "And I have." Ryan looked between us. "Katie." She ignored him, eyes still moving across the paper. "The house is solely in my name," I continued. "Purchased prior to our marriage. The prenup outlines cohabitation with a third party as a material breach." "You're overreacting," she said, but her voice lacked structure. "I'm responding." Silence settled over the entryway. Ryan shifted his weight. "Maybe we should talk about this privately." "There's nothing to discuss," I said. "You're not moving in." The certainty in my tone seemed to land harder than any accusation would have. Katie looked at me like she was seeing someone unfamiliar. Not angry, not pleading, just finished. The SUV idled in the driveway. At 8:11 p.m., almost exactly 24 hours after her ultimatum, the house felt steady again. Not because she was leaving, but because the terms were clear. Katie stepped back onto the porch like the floor inside had tilted. Ryan looked at her, then at me, recalculating. The confidence he'd arrived with thinned out fast. He wasn't prepared for structure. He was prepared for emotion. "This is extreme," Katie said quietly. Not yelling, not pleading, just searching for footing. "We could have handled this differently." "We are," I said. The process server had already walked back to his car. The envelope remained in her hands, pages slightly trembling, not from fear, but from the sudden collapse of expectation. Ryan cleared his throat. "Maybe we should give you 2 space." "That won't be necessary," I said. "There's nothing left to negotiate tonight." Katie's eyes lifted to mine. "You froze the account?" "Yes. All of it. All joint funds." Her silence confirmed what I already knew. She hadn't expected resistance. She hadn't expected review. She certainly hadn't expected timing to move faster than her plan. Ryan shifted again. The money was an investment. "In what entity?" I asked calmly. He opened his mouth, paused, then closed it. "Katie said you were launching a logistics platform." I continued. "I searched California corporate filings this morning. There's no registered company under the name she gave me." He glanced at her. "It's in early development," he said. "Stealth phase. That explains the lack of filings." I replied evenly. Katie stepped in. "This isn't about business." It became about business when $20,000 left our joint account. Her jaw tightened. "I was going to tell you." "When?" She didn't answer. The air between us felt dense but controlled. No raised voices. No accusations thrown like objects. Just facts occupying space. Ryan finally spoke again. "Look, man, we didn't mean to escalate things. We just—" "You gave me a deadline," I said. "I used it. That seemed to settle something. Not agreement. Recognition." Katie exhaled slowly. "So what now?" "Now," I said, "you review the documents. Your attorney contacts mine. You arrange alternate housing. And you stop using this address for any financial activity." She stared at me like she was trying to locate the version of me she expected, the one who would argue, bargain, try to salvage. He wasn't there. I never thought you'd do this, she said. I know. That was the quietest truth of the night. Ryan picked up one of the suitcases. We should go, he muttered. Katie hesitated for half a second, just enough to register that she was choosing something irreversible. Then she followed him down the steps. At the bottom of the driveway, she turned once. You didn't even fight for us, she said. I considered that. I did, I answered. Just not tonight. She held my gaze for a moment longer, then got into the SUV. The engine faded down the street. I closed the front door at 8:23 p.m. No slam, no force, just a firm click of the lock settling into place. The house felt quiet again, not hollow, not victorious, just stable. And for the first time in months, the stability wasn't conditional. The next morning, I woke up before my alarm. For a moment, I forgot what day it was. Then I noticed the silence. No shower running. No cabinet doors opening and closing. No low murmur of a phone call taken by the window. Just the house. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table again. Same seat. Same view of the backyard fence I rebuilt 2 summers ago. The structure was still there. Nothing external had changed. That mattered. At 9:12 a.m., Daniel called. She's retained counsel, he said. They reached out early. Good, I replied. There's more, he continued. We ran a deeper background on Ryan. I didn't interrupt. He's been named in 2 civil complaints in San Diego over the past 18 months. Alleged misrepresentation tied to investment solicitations. No convictions yet, but there's an open inquiry connected to a broader financial fraud investigation. I leaned back slightly in my chair. Not surprised. Just confirming pattern alignment. The $20,000? I asked. Unlikely to be recoverable directly, Daniel said. But it strengthens your position under dissipation. The prenup language is clean. I thanked him and ended the call. An hour later, Katie texted. We need to talk. I responded. Have your attorney contact mine. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. This is bigger than you think. That sentence lingered longer than the others. By early afternoon, Daniel forwarded a notice from opposing counsel. They were requesting temporary access to funds for living expenses. Standard procedure. He included a short note. We're in a strong position. Court will prioritize contractual language. By midweek, more information surfaced. Ryan's so-called startup had no employees, no registered office. The platform existed as a landing page built on a template service. Domain registered 3 months prior, 2 days before the first transfer from our joint account. Katie had invested more than money. She had invested narrative. When the formal hearing date was set, I didn't feel anticipation. I felt efficiency. The process was moving the way processes do when documentation is clear. I drove to work every morning as usual. Reviewed client portfolios. Sat in meetings. No one there knew anything had shifted in my personal life. I didn't offer it. At the preliminary court appearance, Katie avoided eye contact. Ryan wasn't present. Her attorney attempted to frame the transfers as marital discretion. Daniel countered with timestamps, screenshots, and the clause she had once agreed to in a conference room years earlier. The judge reviewed quietly. Contract language appears unambiguous, he said finally. Temporary enforcement granted. Katie's shoulders lowered slightly, not in relief, but in resignation. Outside the courtroom, she approached me alone. I didn't know about the investigation, she said. I believe you, I answered. She studied my face, maybe searching for sarcasm. There wasn't any. Ryan said it was just paperwork issues, she continued. Paperwork tells the truth eventually, I replied. She looked smaller somehow. Not physically, structurally. The illusion had collapsed faster than she expected. Over the next month, filings accumulated. Statements, affidavits, financial disclosures. The court moved steadily. Ryan's name appeared again in a broader federal inquiry notice. The money was gone. The narrative was gone. And what had started as a private ultimatum in my kitchen had become official record. Not loud, just documented. The final hearing lasted less than 40 minutes. There were no dramatic speeches, no character attacks, just structured review. The prenup was entered into record. The timeline of transfers was verified. The cohabitation intent was acknowledged through her own messages. The judge asked direct questions. Katie answered quietly. Yes, I transferred the funds. Yes, I intended for him to move into the residence. Yes, I was aware of the agreement we signed. Each answer narrowed the space. Ryan's name surfaced briefly when Daniel referenced the ongoing investigation tied to his prior solicitations. The judge didn't dwell on it. He didn't need to. The issue wasn't Ryan's guilt. It was the contractual breach. When the ruling came down, it felt procedural. Prenup enforced in full. No alimony. Reimbursement owed for dissipation of joint funds, to be structured against remaining marital assets. Property confirmed as separate, exclusively mine. Temporary restrictions converted to permanent orders. The gavel didn't slam. It simply lowered. Katie didn't look at me when it was over. Outside the courthouse, the sky was flat gray, typical Seattle morning. She stood near the steps, coat pulled tight around her. "I never thought it would go this way," she said. "It went exactly the way it was written," I replied. She nodded once. No anger, just the recognition of consequence. "Ryan left?" she added after a moment. I waited. When the investigation widened, he stopped answering calls. "I believe that too." "I'm sorry," she said finally. It wasn't theatrical. It wasn't desperate. It sounded tired. "I know," I answered. There was nothing else to say that wouldn't reopen something already closed. I walked to my car alone. That evening, I returned to the house before sunset. I stood in the entryway for a moment, listening to the quiet. Same hardwood floors. Same staircase. Same framed photos still on the wall. I removed the ones with both of us in them. Not angrily, just carefully. Placed them in a box. Labeled it. Stored it in the basement. The joint account had been formally dissolved that afternoon. Remaining balances redistributed according to the ruling. My email inbox, once cluttered with legal correspondence, was finally still. I sat on the back deck with a glass of water and watched the light fade over the fence line. There was no rush of triumph. No sense of victory. Just an absence of tension. For months, maybe longer, I had been living in a quiet distortion, adjusting to behavior that didn't align, explaining away inconsistencies. Now everything aligned again. Not because I won, because it was clear. Around 9 p.m., I locked the doors and turned off the downstairs lights. When I reached the bedroom, I paused briefly in the doorway. The room felt larger without the undercurrent of secrecy that had occupied it. I lay down and closed my eyes. No replaying conversations. No strategizing. No monitoring. Just stillness. The house she once told me to leave remained exactly where it had always been. And so did I. A year later, I sold the house. Not because I had to. Because I wanted a different horizon. I moved closer to the coast, west of the city, where the air carries salt and the mornings come in slower. I scaled back my client load. Fewer emergencies. More select contracts. Structure without chaos. Sometimes I think about that Sunday at 8:12 p.m. The certainty in her voice. The way she believed the clock belonged to her. 24 hours isn't much time, but it's enough. Enough to stop negotiating with reality. Enough to gather facts. Enough to decide whether you're reacting or responding. When someone gives you a deadline to disappear from your own life, you don't always need to argue. Sometimes you just need to move with precision. She thought she was replacing me. What she really did was remove the last distraction. And that was all the time I needed. That's the end of this story. If you made it all the way here, consider subscribing to stay with us. I've placed a couple of recommended videos on screen for you. Pick one and keep watching. I'll see you in the next story.